The teachings of the Russian Revolution are typically viewed as lessons stemming from its failure. However, there are countless opportunities to gain insights from both the events surrounding its success and its downfall. A primary reason for this perception is the sequential collapse of socialist nations and the narratives pushed by bourgeois and petty bourgeois intellectuals. These proponents of financial capital have obscured the truth about the revolution's significant accomplishments with a dense cloud of falsehoods regarding its failure. Their fabrications were rooted in two main aspects. They depicted the betrayers of socialism as its legitimate executors while portraying the genuine heroes as antagonists. Additionally, they sought to demonstrate the superiority of bourgeois democracy by erasing the class essence of the proletarian dictatorship. In this context, there was an effort to misinterpret the teachings of Marx and Engels, framing them as liberal bourgeois concepts. Both of them consistently asserted that the proletariat would utilize its power to gradually seize the means of production from capitalists, and this endeavor would initially necessitate the authoritarian application of power. The authoritarian application of power used to gradually take control of production from capitalists is essentially what is meant by the dictatorship of the proletariat. This concept of Marx and Engels was overlooked, and it was propagated that the dictatorship of the proletariat exceeds the boundaries of bourgeois democracy. This is indeed true concerning the higher phase of the dictatorship of the proletariat, which cannot be realized without finishing the processes of the lower phase.
Is it you who wants Russia to surrender to Germany?
Comrade officer, I want no more Russians slaughtered at the front on behalf of profiteers.
Our duty is clear. We must wipe out the Germans once and for all.
They've already lost the war. If not today, then tomorrow. Russian soldiers must live to return home and join the revolution. If you don't understand that, how can you say you represent the Russian people? Or did you appoint yourself to speak for them? Ask the farmhands what they want. Ask the workers what they want. The farmhands want the land, the workers the factories.
Revisionist and bourgeois thinkers have worked together to dilute Marxism down to the level of liberal capitalism. They were not acting out of a dilemma. The immediate foundation of their deception was the bourgeois welfare state, which was embraced under the influence of the dictatorship of the proletariat. For a time, the imperialist bourgeoisie concealed its predatory nature behind the facade of the welfare state. Lenin and Stalin both highlighted these shifts. Stalin even remarked that the bourgeoisie feared the potential spread of the workers' movement from the Soviet Union to their country's workers, which is why they adopted reformist measures.
The main targets of the American communists have been labor, students and teachers, government offices, all of which they attempt to corrupt by boring from within. So far, each of these agencies has done an excellent job of detecting their motives. Communist Party members were removed from positions of authority in one of America's biggest unions. Other unions have followed suit in warning outside groups to leave union affairs alone. The security of the United States government demands a constant check on suspected government employees and the machinery to bring them to trial if necessary. Congressional committees maintain a constant watch over all phases of communist activity.
This served as a warning that the benefits provided to workers in those countries would persist only as long as the threat of socialism remains looming over the heads of the capitalists there. His evaluation turned out to be remarkably prophetic. When the ghost of socialism faded away from the Soviet Union, which had effectively ceased to exist between 1956 and 1960, the facade of the welfare state began to crumble, revealing its ghastly, predatory nature. The veil of falsehoods started to lift and the light of truth began to shine once more. We cannot completely evade responsibility by attributing all these adverse circumstances solely to class enemies and indecisive factions. In reality, after the Communist Party of the Soviet Union fell into the hands of the revisionists or supporters of capitalism in 1956, a state of ruin emerged within the global communist movement, allowing imperialism to breathe easier. The revolutionary camp took considerable time to fully grasp the consequences of this situation. In this regard, it is worthwhile to reflect on Marx's remarks about the deviations in England's labour movement around a century ago, that is 1857 to 1859, particularly the detrimental role of its prominent leader, Ernest Jones, and its implications. Labeling this as a betrayal of the working class, Marx wrote to Joseph Wedmere on February 1, 1859, that Jones had failed and the Chartist Party had suffered significant losses. There is no doubt that the error will be rectified, but the critical moment has been forfeited. Consider an army whose commander collaborates with the enemy right before the conflict begins. Due to this betrayal by the proletariat's leader, the working class in England missed a historic opportunity to lead the global proletarian revolution. The consequences of the betrayal by the leaders of the Soviet Union turned out to be far more disastrous than that. To this day, the global communist movement has struggled to overcome this influence. The remarkable insight of Karl Marx is highlighted by the fact that when deviations began in 1857, he promptly started alerting the representatives of the working class that the labour leaders of England had fallen under the sway of the bourgeoisie and were aligning with the capitalist class of their nation. However, during this period, the revolutionary faction of the Chinese communists recognized the phenomenon of Soviet revisionism only after a considerable delay, struggled to grasp it fully, and the infiltration of bourgeois followers was so entrenched that within 20 years, it too fell into revisionism. After World War II, amidst the transitional phase of imperialism's approach, the global socialist bloc was also not cohesive. The Comintern had already been disbanded, and although the Cominform was formed, it was not particularly effective. Furthermore, Yugoslavia distanced itself from that camp and became a mediator for imperialism, while the Communist Party of the Soviet Union faced internal chaos. The faction of traitors was emerging, yet struggling to gain traction. Following Stalin's death, pro-bourgeois forces gained prominence, initiating a period of capitalist restoration, which, during Brezhnev's rule, transformed into social imperialism, leading to the collapse of the entire socialist bloc, except for China and Albania. In the midst of this, a significant debate occurred between the Soviet Union's and China's communist parties in 1963, known historically as the Great Debate. Under these circumstances, the fragmentation of the Indian communist movement began. The first split occurred in 1964, resulting in the formation of CPIM. Subsequently, the Naxalbari peasant rebellion emerged from within CPIM in 1967, giving rise to a new political entity, CPIML, in 1969. Unlike the 1964 division, the 1967 uprising and subsequent party formation in 1969 gained international significance with ideological roots linked to the Communist Party of China. The ideological clash between new and old colonialism first manifested as a policy debate during the Great Debate. It later appeared in the documents of the All India Coordination Committee of Communist Revolutionaries, AICCCR. At that time, it was essential to clarify all the pressing issues of that era. The urgent questions then included how the structure and nature of Marxism adapted after Khrushchev's critique of Stalin and how Stalin's contribution should be assessed. Additionally, how did the shifts in imperialism's methods during the neo-colonial era affect Indian society and class relations, and whether feudalism and feudal bureaucracies served as the core supporters of imperialism in this new age as they did in the previous era of colonialism? Only by accurately answering these questions could the strategy and tactics for the Indian Revolution be determined. The initial question's answer was clearly articulated in the AICCCR documents, stating that Mao's ideology represents contemporary Marxism-Leninism. This was the period of the Cultural Revolution, hence the resolutions from the 9th Congress of the Communist Party of China resonated across the global revolutionary sphere, and this concept was undoubtedly embraced here as well. However, the other two questions remained unclear, reflecting the ideological turmoil that accompanied the founding of the Communist Party of India in 1925, albeit in different circumstances. The Communist Party of China did not find it necessary to resolve these two issues immediately, but Indian communist revolutionaries could not afford to disregard them for an extended period, which eventually occurred. Disagreements and splits emerged during the party's formation, but the formal division within the party began a year following the 8th Congress. The ideological confusion deepened further after the 10th Congress of the Communist Party of China, during which the party revised several of its assessments made at the 9th Congress. By then, the Cultural Revolution had concluded as a compromise between the working class and the bourgeois class. Deng, previously labeled as a bourgeois supporter at the 9th Congress, gained prominence at the 10th Congress. After Mao's death, China's trajectory mirrored that of Russia, leading to a period of ideological crisis in the communist revolutionary movement in our country, characterized by fragmentation. Ultimately, the movement disintegrated without achieving its intended outcomes, resulting in a significant setback from which we are still struggling to recover. The ascendancy of bourgeois proponents within the Chinese Communist Party and the subsequent restoration of capitalism were pivotal in reaching this juncture. Just as the Indian Communist Party, established post-Russian Revolution, turned revisionist after capitalism was restored there, the CPIML, which emerged influenced by the Chinese Communist Party, has similarly failed to navigate the correct path for the Indian Revolution despite its divisions. It now appears that this deviation has solidified into a permanent condition. To amend this circumstance, our goal is to analyze the shortcomings and errors through the lens of the Russian Revolution's experiences. Following the Chinese Communist Party's shift to revisionism in 1980, the campaign against revisionism within the global communist movement fell apart, paving the way for a complete reconciliation with imperialism. This era fostered the notion that imperialism was unstoppable and that socialism was transitory. However, after 1991, particularly in the 21st century, as various crises of imperialism emerged, it has become evident that its foundation resembles that of Duryodhana, whose powerful exterior contrasts with a fragile core that cannot endure even a single strike from Bhima. Yet, despite imperialism's vulnerabilities, the global working class has not gained sufficient strength to launch a decisive offensive against it. In this context, the foremost task today is to adapt Marxism-Leninism to the requirements of the current situation and instill it within the populace consciousness. Marxism functions as a scientific framework for social evolution, and the precise analysis of real conditions is central to it. This is a widely recognized principle. However, only a few people can apply it effectively, which is why only a few can lead a revolution to success or persuade revolutionaries that the prevailing power dynamics in society at the moment are not favorable for a revolution and how the working class should identify its position in that environment. By doing so, they safeguard the developing embryo of revolution within the womb of society from outside dangers and fulfill their revolutionary duty by ensuring it is passed into the future's capable hands. Marx and Engels, as the initial theorists of the global proletariat, exemplified such thinkers. Although the proletarian revolution did not succeed in any nation under their guidance, their theoretical impact was present in every revolution that occurred. This significant influence has laid the foundation for their ideas to endure through time. In this sense, the lessons of both the victory and defeat of the Russian Revolution are very relevant. At this juncture of crisis, the biggest lessons of the 100-year history of the Russian Revolution is to understand what are the material conditions for the formation of a communist party in a country and what could be the Marxist way of working in it, especially in a society where efforts have been made in this direction and the entire structure has been put to the service of capitalism or has disintegrated. We see a sample of defensive policy based on a concrete analysis of the concrete situation in Marx's letter to Engels, written on October 8, 1858. Europe was the epicenter of the proletarian revolution and capitalist development during their era, which alarmed the bourgeois class. This marked one side of the objective reality. Conversely, capitalist relations were proliferating across the expanses of the globe, infusing it with vitality. Highlighting this dynamic force, Marx stated, "The proper task of bourgeois society is the creation of the world market, at least in outline, and of the production based on that market. Since the world is round, the colonization of California and Australia and the opening up of China and Japan would seem to have completed this process. For us, the difficult question is this: on the continent, revolution is imminent and will moreover instantly assume a socialist character. Will it not necessarily be crushed in this little corner of the earth, since the movement of bourgeois society is still in the ascendant over a far greater area?" By the turn of the 20th century, circumstances shifted. The era of colonization had concluded, and Europe moved from being a center of revolution to a stronghold of opportunism. The European proletariat had forfeited the chance for revolution that Marx had indicated could erupt in Europe. Another transformation that occurred was the inevitability of a world war among imperialist nations for the reallocation of colonies. In examining these changes thoroughly, Lenin determined that a revolution could triumph even in just one nation, particularly in the nation regarded as the most vulnerable link in imperialism. This was the conclusion drawn in the age of imperialism and the proletarian revolution, which significantly diverged from Marx's original thesis. In light of these insights from these two conclusions reached through the Marxist framework, let us reflect on our current position. This reflection is particularly crucial for the communist movement in India, as it significantly influences the trajectory of future initiatives. The relevance of this inquiry is undeniable, especially during the 50th anniversary of the Naxalbari peasant uprising. One of the most distressing and concerning aspects of the revolutionary movement is the fragmentation of the party that emerged from the Naxalbari peasant uprising, which has splintered into multiple factions, with the likelihood of unification diminishing, particularly in an era when there is a plethora of Unitarians. The extensive history of unity and division highlights that opportunism is the primary cause of this fragmentation. In light of the splintering within the revolutionary movement and the hostile stance of the reactionaries, an effort is being made once more to advocate for the unification of all organizations identifying as communist, regardless of their variations. Whether or not those making such appeals intend it, the message of their appeal goes out as if reactionism has won due to this fragmentation. This puts a question mark on the political legitimacy of the Naxalbari peasant revolt. However, they remain largely apathetic to this concern. A tendency has emerged to analyze the historical significance of the Naxalbari peasant revolt in a fragmented manner. One stream considers the armed struggle as its central contribution, while the other stream considers the mass agitation. Meanwhile, a new trend has started to push the class struggle to the background and give importance to the struggle of identities. A common aspect among these perspectives is their failure to acknowledge the importance of the anti-revisionist sentiments that arose from the Naxalbari peasant revolt. Under the pressure of this understanding, many groups of CPIML adopted the stance that if class struggle is deprioritized, caste struggle must take precedence. This was accompanied by the assertion that caste equates to class, thereby making it fashionable to perceive caste struggles as synonymous with class struggles. This effectively disarms the working class against the bourgeois class by negating the significance of class struggle. On one hand, this situation validates Marx's analysis, and on the other, it reinforces Lenin's thesis regarding the relationship between opportunism and imperialism, which was evident in the communist, which was then the social democratic movement of the 20th century, illustrating the interplay between these two forces in the politics of the working class. This is the ideological political quagmire in which revolutionaries have been trapped. How did this happen, and what is the way out of it? Only by finding answers to these questions can we claim to learn lessons from the victory and defeat of the Russian Revolution. Through the analysis of 100 years of Russian Revolution, we aim to uncover responses to today's pressing inquiries.